By dawn the cold had sharpened the air into glass. Timberline Common sat in its tidy semicircle, cabins aligned, gravel raked, rules posted. Yet smoke didn't rise from half the chimneys. Elias Mercer stood on his porch and watched his white tanks catch the first light. Their collars were rimed with frost, regulators wrapped in thermal blankets, manifold heaters idling. Tires crunched on gravel. 2 electric utility carts rolled in, studs biting ice. Above them hovered the HOA's inspection drone, matte black, camera on a gimbal, a single red status eye that never blinked. Marlene Kincaid climbed out first, clipboard hugged to her chest like a shield. "Mr. Mercer," she called, as if this were a scheduled courtesy. "We need access to your storage." Elias didn't step off the porch. "You already inspected. You photographed. You find. What's left?" "Compliance." Marlene's smile was thin. "Our bylaw requires you to reduce combustible reserves to permitted limits. Yesterday you refused. Last night, residents experienced a disruption." A door down the row banged open. Mrs. Dalton shuffled out wrapped in a blanket, hair wild. "My thermostat's dead," she shouted. "My pipes are ticking." Marlene didn't turn. "Not now. This is an emergency and your cooperation is mandatory." Elias glanced at the drone as its lens tightened. He pictured the feed painting him as the problem. He lifted his palm, calm. "Emergency. Your communal tanks are full." "Our distribution is not," Marlene snapped. "The communal manifold reads zero flow." "Because you locked me out of it," Elias said. Behind her, 2 board members shifted. Gavin from Lot 12, Cologne and Swagger, and Priya, who voted with Marlene because fear was easier than conflict. Marlene recovered fast. "The manifold is HOA property." "It's on my easement," Elias replied. "And I built it." "You signed the service agreement." Section 9. Owner retains operational control in the event of safety violation. Gavin scoffed. "You're inventing clauses." Elias went inside and returned with a weatherproof folder. He opened it and angled the page toward the drone. Signatures. Dates. The old ink of a contract that hadn't been meant to matter until it did. Priya leaned in. "Marlene, is that real?" Marlene's cheeks warmed. "Irrelevant. The bylaw supersedes private agreements." "Your bylaw is an algorithm," Elias said. "Mine is a contract." The drone chirped. "Policy conflict." Its red eye pulsed faster. Marlene's gaze flicked to it, then back. "We're here because your hoarding destabilized the community. The Thermal Authority flagged unusual patterns. They're monitoring us." That name carried weight. 2 winters ago the Thermal Authority arrived with smart meters and ration tokens, promising fairness while wiring every cabin into a ledger. Heat became permission. Elias kept his voice flat. "They monitor everything. And they'll penalize all of us if we don't resolve this," Marlene said. "Restore flow. Then we can address your stash." "I'm not restoring flow to a system you use to punish people," Elias said. "You started this." Gavin stepped forward, breath steaming. "Turn it back on, man. Stop playing martyr." Elias pointed to where insulated pipes disappeared beneath the dirt. "That line doesn't feed my house. It feeds yours. You wanted to tell me what I'm allowed to store. Fine. But you don't get to store what I maintain." Marlene's tone hardened. "This is extortion." "This is boundaries," Elias said. "You wrote them. You just assumed they'd only apply to me." Mrs. Dalton stumbled closer, eyes shining. "Elias, please. My husband's heart meds, he can't get chilled like this." Elias's jaw tightened. "I'm not trying to hurt anyone." "Then don't," she whispered. The drone dipped. Its eye shifted from red to amber. Warning. Elias knew amber meant escalation was cued. Marlene saw it too and straightened as if the machine were lending her spine. "Last chance. The HOA will initiate forced abatement. The authority has authorized seizure of non-compliant reserves." A colder feeling slid through Elias than the wind. "They can try." He stepped down, crossed the pad, and rested his gloved hand on the nearest tank. Steel bit through fabric. Marlene's voice rose. These tanks are tagged, RFID, ledgered. Every pound logged. Not mine, Elias said. I stripped the tags the day you installed your meters. Gavin's eyes widened. That's illegal. So is rerouting communal fuel to power your surveillance, Elias replied. Priya stiffened. What surveillance? Elias looked past them toward the center of the development. A sleek pole rose above the roofs, dressed up as a seasonal mast with a wreath at the top. At night its indicator lights glowed like a small, hungry constellation while cabins went dark. Marlene's mouth tightened. Conspiracy. Math, Elias said. Your manifold didn't fail. You diverted flow. The drone buzzed sharper and angled in, scanning Elias's regulators. A tiny arm unfolded beneath its body, ending in a cutter meant for seals. Elias moved first. He tapped the black box mounted at the pad's edge, his controller, a relic from his old work in distributed systems. The display flashed, local lock. The drone's arm twitched, then froze midair. Its eye flickered, cycling colors as it failed to negotiate control. Marlene stared as if gravity had shifted. What did you do? I told it no, Elias said. More doors opened along the semicircle. Residents drifted out, drawn by the commotion and the bite of their own failing heat. They watched the drone hover, helpless, and something changed in the air. Doubt, contagious as fire. Marlene tightened her grip on the clipboard until her knuckles went white. You can't shut us out, she hissed. We are the community. Elias met her stare. No, he said. You're a committee with a drone. I'm the one who knows where the warmth comes from. For a beat, only the trees snapped in the cold. Then, from the direction of the decorative mast, a high keening tone rolled across the cabins, an alarm that made every head turn. Elias's stomach dropped. He knew that sound. Thermal Authority audit mode. And it wasn't aimed at him. Morning arrived like a verdict. Frost clung to the stacked firewood behind Elias Mercer's cabin, turning every split log into a pale, glittering brick. The propane tanks beside the concrete pad stood silent and solid, their rounded shoulders catching the weak alpine sun. Across timberline commons, chimneys that should have been smoking were bare. Elias noticed it immediately. He stepped off his porch, boots crunching over frozen gravel, and listened. No hum of heaters. No distant rumble of generators. Just the wind threading through pine needles and the faint creak of timber cabins settling under cold. Then came the sound of engines. 2 utility carts rolled down the main loop road, HOA seals stamped on their doors. Above them floated a surveillance drone, black and sleek, its lens swiveling with mechanical patience. Marlene Kincaid stood in the lead cart, immaculate even in the biting air. Wool coat. Pearl necklace. Clipboard tucked under her arm like a weapon made of paper. She climbed out, her heels sinking slightly into frost-hardened dirt. Mr. Mercer, she called, voice sharp enough to cut ice. We need to speak. Elias didn't move closer. We spoke yesterday. This is different. Marlene's eyes flicked toward the tanks. The communal system is down. A second figure stepped out behind her, Gavin Holt, one of the board's loudest supporters, his face already flushed with indignation. You did something, Gavin accused before Marlene could continue. Half the neighborhood woke up freezing. Elias exhaled slowly. Your system didn't fail. You shut it off. Marlene's jaw tightened. Don't be dramatic. The Thermal Authority flagged an anomaly at 3 a.m. The manifold shows no distribution. Elias folded his arms. Not my problem. It is your problem, she snapped. Because you're hoarding. You've destabilized the grid. At the word grid, several cabin doors opened. Residents emerged wrapped in blankets, drawn out by fear and discomfort. Mrs. Dalton, cheeks red from cold, stared toward Elias's tanks with desperate eyes. My pipes are going to burst, she whispered. Marlene seized the moment. Do you see? She said loudly, addressing the small crowd. One person's selfish stockpile has put everyone at risk. Elias's gaze swept over them. These were his neighbors. People who smiled in summer, shared tools, waved from porches. Now they looked at him like he was an enemy. He kept his voice steady. I stored fuel because winters here kill. The authority rationed deliveries. I prepared. Gavin scoffed. Prepared? You mean paranoid? Elias turned slightly, eyes narrowing. Paranoid is trusting an HOA to manage survival. Marlene stepped forward. Enough. Under HOA Bylaw 14C, excessive combustible storage is prohibited. You were instructed to reduce your reserves. And under contract, Elias replied, I retain operational control of the distribution line I built. Marlene blinked once. Excuse me. Elias walked to the edge of the concrete pad and pointed toward the buried pipes that ran from his property toward the center of Timberline Commons. That manifold. The one feeding your communal tanks. It was installed before the HOA even existed. I maintained it. I upgraded it. I signed the service agreement when you wanted efficient heating infrastructure. Gavin laughed. That doesn't mean you own it. Elias reached into his jacket and pulled out a folded document sealed in plastic. He held it up so Marlene could see the signatures. Marlene's expression shifted, irritation mixing with something sharper. Priya Soto, another board member, leaned closer, eyes scanning the page. Marlene, Priya murmured. This clause is real. Marlene snapped the clipboard tighter against her chest. Private agreements don't override community law. They do when your law is abusive, Elias answered. The drone dipped lower, its lens focusing on the document, recording everything. Marlene noticed and straightened, regaining her practiced authority. This isn't about abuse, she said. It's about safety. The authority monitors propane flow. They don't tolerate irregularities. Elias's voice dropped. They don't tolerate independence. A murmur rippled through the residents. The thermal authority had arrived 2 years ago with promises. Fair rationing, smart meters, automated delivery schedules. In exchange, every cabin received a heat token system. Warmth became something measured, tracked, approved. Elias never liked it. Marlene's tone sharpened. Restore flow. Immediately. Then we'll discuss your violation. Elias stared at her. You cut off my access yesterday. You threatened seizure. Now you want me to fix your shortage. Gavin threw his hands up. Just turn it back on. People are freezing. Mrs. Dalton stepped forward, trembling. Elias, please. My husband's sick. We can't go without heat. The plea hit harder than Marlene's threats. Elias swallowed. I'm not trying to hurt anyone. Then stop this, Mrs. Dalton whispered. Marlene seized control again. Last warning, she said. If you refuse, the HOA will initiate forced abatement. The authority has already authorized inspection of your tanks. The words landed like a stone. Inspection meant tags. Confiscation. Redistribution. Elias knew the authority's methods. Once they labeled you non-compliant, you became a resource, not a person. Elias stepped down from the porch, boots firm on the frozen ground. They can try, he said quietly. Marlene's eyes narrowed. What is that supposed to mean? Elias walked to the black control box mounted beside the pad. An old-fashioned unit, not connected to the authority's network. His own design. He placed a gloved hand on the panel. The drone buzzed, sensing movement. Its mechanical arm unfolded beneath its chassis, a cutter designed for seals. Residents gasped. Marlene lifted her chin. Do not interfere with enforcement equipment. Elias tapped the screen. Local lock. Enabled. The drone's arm jerked mid-motion, then froze. Its eye flickered rapidly, cycling through warning colors as it failed to override the command. For the first time, the machine looked confused. Marlene stared. What did you do? I reminded it, Elias said calmly, that this line doesn't belong to you. Gavin's mouth fell open. That's illegal. Elias's gaze hardened. So is starving people to keep them obedient. Priya stepped back, unease spreading across her face. Marlene, what exactly did we sign up for? Marlene's voice rose, strained. This is sabotage. No, Elias replied. This is a boundary. The crowd stood silent, watching the powerless drone hover like an insect caught in amber. Then, from the center of Timberline Commons, a piercing alarm cut through the cold. Every head turned toward the decorative mast near the clubhouse, its lights flashing crimson. Audit mode activated. Elias felt his stomach drop. That sound didn't mean the HOA was coming. It meant the thermal authority already had. The alarm didn't fade. It pulsed through Timberline Commons like a heartbeat that didn't belong to any living thing. Crimson lights stuttered atop the mast near the clubhouse, reflecting off cabin windows and frozen ground. The sound was too clean, too precise, manufactured panic. Marlene Kincaid's face went pale, but she recovered quickly, as if fear were something she could file away later. The authority, she said under her breath. Elias Mercer didn't answer. He was already moving, eyes locked on the road beyond the cabins. A black transport slid into view, silent except for the crunch of ice beneath its tires. No exhaust. No headlights. Its surface swallowed the morning light like oil. The crowd backed instinctively. The vehicle stopped at the center of the loop. A hatch opened with a hydraulic sigh, and 3 figures stepped out. Not soldiers. Auditors. They wore long grey coats threaded with faint circuitry, their collars stiff with embedded sensors. Each carried a slim tablet, and behind their eyes glimmered the dull sheen of augmented lenses. The one in front approached with measured steps. Timberline Commons, the auditor said, voice smooth and synthetic. Heat Distribution Node 7B has registered an authorized interruption. Marlene stepped forward immediately, posture snapping into practiced obedience. Director, auditor, thank you for coming. We have a resident in violation. Elias Mercer. He has been stockpiling beyond allowance and interfering with communal supply. The auditor's head tilted slightly, as if listening to data no one else could hear. Resident Mercer, it repeated. Flagged for irregular consumption patterns. Tag removal detected. Gavin inhaled sharply. Priya looked like she might be sick. Elias remained still, shoulders squared. You sent them, he said to Marlene, not even looking at her. I had no choice, she hissed back. You forced escalation. The auditor turned toward Elias. Step forward. Elias did. The residents held their breath as he crossed the frozen dirt, stopping a few feet from the authority agent. Up close, Elias could see the faint microdrones drifting around the auditor's shoulders like dust motes. The auditor raised its tablet. Your reserves exceed communal allocation. You have disabled RFID compliance. You have obstructed HOA enforcement equipment. Under Thermal Regulation Code 3.1, your fuel will be redistributed. Mrs. Dalton made a sound somewhere between a sob and a gasp. Elias's jaw tightened. Redistributed to whom? The auditor didn't blink. To the community. Elias let out a humorless laugh. You mean to the ledger? Marlene snapped. Don't antagonize them. But Elias wasn't speaking to Marlene anymore. He was speaking to the machine that wore a human silhouette. This neighborhood survived winters before you arrived, he said. People stored wood. People filled tanks. They planned. You turned warmth into a subscription. A murmur spread through the crowd. Not agreement exactly. More like recognition. The auditor's voice remained unchanged. Survival is optimized through centralized control. Elias leaned slightly forward. And obedience is optimized through scarcity. For the first time, something flickered behind the auditor's lenses. Not emotion. Calculation. Your rhetoric is noted, it said. Non-compliance persists. Proceeding with seizure. The 2 auditors behind it moved, hands lifting toward the tanks. Marlene exhaled sharply, relief flashing across her features. Elias turned his head, scanning the residents. Do you understand what happens next? He asked them. No one answered. Priya whispered. Elias, please. Just cooperate. We can fix this later. There is no later, Elias replied softly. Once they take control, they never give it back. Gavin barked. Stop acting like some hero. You caused this. Elias's gaze cut toward him. No, Gavin. You voted for this. You wanted rules. You wanted order. Now you get auditors instead of neighbors. The crowd shifted uncomfortably. The lead auditor lifted its wrist. A signal pulsed outward. The drone above Elias's pad shuddered, rebooting under authority override. Its red eye brightened, now fully controlled. Marlene's lips parted in triumph. See, she said. They can fix what you broke. Elias didn't respond. His hand slipped into his jacket pocket, fingers brushing the small metal key he'd carried for years. Not a key for a lock. A key for a system. He had built the manifold. He had wired the backup lines. And long before the authority arrived, he had designed something else, an off-grid protocol meant for emergencies. He looked at the auditor. You think you own heat, Elias said quietly. But you don't understand the mountain. The auditor paused. Clarify. Elias lifted his chin toward the pine forest beyond the cabins. This place doesn't run on your network. It runs on what we keep alive ourselves. Marlene's voice rose, sharp with panic now. What are you doing? Elias didn't answer her. He turned and walked back toward his control box. The auditor called after him. Stop. Failure to comply will result in punitive thermal restriction. Elias reached the panel and inserted the metal key. The screen flickered. Off-grid mode. Available. Priya's eyes widened. Elias, what is that? He looked over his shoulder. It's what we should have had all along. Marlene lunged forward. No. You can't cut the authority out. Elias pressed his thumb against the confirmation pad. A low vibration rolled through the ground, subtle but unmistakable. The communal mast lights faltered, crimson flickering like a dying star. The auditors froze. Their tablets flashed warnings. Network link. Lost. For the first time, their calm fractured. Unauthorized severance detected, the lead auditor said, voice sharpening. Elias straightened. I didn't sever anything, he replied. I reclaimed it. Across Timberline Commons, heaters coughed back to life, not through the authority's ration system, but through Elias's independent line. Warmth began flowing directly, bypassing the ledger. Residents gasped as vents hissed and radiators clicked. Mrs. Dalton pressed a hand to her mouth. Gavin stared, stunned. How? Elias cut him off. Because I never trusted them. The lead auditor stepped forward, coat rippling with internal circuitry. You have initiated an illegal parallel distribution. Elias met its gaze. I initiated freedom. Marlene's voice cracked. You'll doom us. They'll shut us down completely. Elias's expression hardened. Let them try. The auditor raised its wrist again, but nothing happened. No drones surged. No override arrived. For the first time, the authority looked small against the mountains. Then, from the black transport, a new sound emerged, deeper than the alarm, heavier than wind. A broadcast tone. The lead auditor's head snapped toward it. Escalation protocol engaged, it announced. Elias felt the cold return, not in the air but in his bones. Because the authority didn't like losing control. And it never came in person unless it planned to stay. The broadcast tone spread through Timberline Commons like an incoming storm. It wasn't loud, yet it carried weight, vibrating in the ribs more than the ears. The auditors stood unnaturally still, their tablets flashing with cascading warnings. Marlene Kincaid looked as if the world had slipped out from under her. You don't understand what you've done, she whispered, voice trembling for the first time. Elias Mercer didn't look away from the transport. I understand perfectly, he said. They only show up when they intend to make an example. The black vehicle's surface shimmered. Panels shifted, unfolding like mechanical petals. Something inside powered up, casting a cold blue glow across the snow-dusted ground. Priya backed toward the crowd, hands raised instinctively. Elias, Can you undo it? Elias shook his head once. If I undo it, they'll take everything anyway. At least now the neighborhood knows what's happening. Gavin's voice cracked with disbelief. We just wanted rules. Clean lawns. Order. Not this. Elias finally turned toward him. Order is easy when someone else pays the price, he said. You let them turn heat into leverage because you thought it wouldn't reach you. The lead auditor's augmented lenses brightened. Its voice came sharper now, stripped of synthetic politeness. Parallel distribution constitutes rebellion against thermal regulation authority jurisdiction. Escalation approved. Marlene stepped forward, desperation overtaking pride. Please, she said, almost pleading. He acted alone. The HOA cooperates fully. Timberline Commons remains compliant. The auditor didn't acknowledge her. Compliance was irrelevant once control was challenged. The broadcast tone shifted again, resolving into words. Node 7B under review. Community access temporarily suspended. A collective gasp rose from the residents. Mrs. Dalton clutched her blanket tighter. Suspended. What does that mean? Elias answered before anyone else could. It means they'll freeze you until you beg. Marlene spun toward him, fury returning like a reflex. This is your fault. No, Elias said, voice steady. This is the system you invited in. The mast near the clubhouse flickered, then went dark entirely. The authorities' network was blind here now, cut off from Elias's off-grid line. But blindness didn't mean defeat. It meant escalation. The transport's hatch opened wider. A new figure emerged. Not an auditor. This one wore no grey coat. Instead, it carried a rigid exosuit of matte white, its limbs reinforced, its chest marked with a single symbol, a stylized flame inside a cage. An enforcement custodian. The crowd stumbled backward as it stepped onto the frozen dirt, boots sinking with heavy precision. Gavin whispered, "That's military." Elias's throat tightened. Worse. It's corporate. The custodian's helmet turned, scanning. Its voice came through an external speaker, low and absolute. Resident Mercer. Surrender control of unauthorized infrastructure. Elias didn't move. Oh, he asked. All community termination of supply will proceed until compliance is restored. Marlene's breath hitched. They can't do that. People will die. The custodian's head tilted slightly. Thermal scarcity is an acceptable corrective measure. Priya covered her mouth, horror spreading across her face. Elias took a slow step forward. You hear that? He called to the residents. That's what you traded your freedom for. A committee. A drone. A ledger. And now a gun with a heat quota. The custodian lifted one arm. A device unfolded, sleek, humming, aimed not at Elias but at the propane tanks. Marlene screamed. No. Elias's eyes widened. The custodian wasn't here to seize. It was here to destroy. Elias sprinted. He slammed his palm onto the control box, fingers flying over switches. The manifold valves responded instantly, rerouting flow away from the exposed tanks into buried reserves only he knew existed. The custodian fired. A pulse of blue energy struck the nearest tank's collar, coating it in crystalline frost. The steel groaned, temperature dropping violently. Residents shouted, scrambling back. Elias shouted over them, "Stay away from the pads." Gavin fell hard onto the dirt, scrambling to his feet. This is insane. Elias didn't stop moving. He reached beneath the control panel, yanked free a secondary lever. Emergency severance. Engaged. A deep rumble rolled through the ground as underground lines sealed themselves. The communal tanks were cut off entirely now, no longer targets. The custodian's helmet snapped toward Elias. You prioritize assets over obedience, it said. Elias panted, breath steaming. I prioritize lives. Marlene stumbled forward, voice cracking. Elias, please. Fix this. Talk to them. Do something. Elias looked at her then, truly looked. You built your authority on paperwork, he said quietly. They built theirs on starvation. You thought you were in charge because you could find people for firewood. Marlene's eyes filled with tears. I was trying to protect the community. No, Elias replied. You were trying to control it. The custodian stepped closer, each footfall heavy. Final directive, surrender. Elias straightened, exhaustion and resolve mixing into something sharp. No. The custodian's arm rose again. Before it could fire, a new sound cut through the air, high, sudden, alive. A snowmobile engine. Then another. From the tree line beyond the cabins, figures emerged, locals from outside Timberline Commons. People Elias had helped over the years. Off-grid homesteaders, hunters, mechanics. They rode in fast, circling the transport, engine snarling. At their front was an older woman with wind-burned cheeks and a rifle slung across her back. She pulled off her goggles and called, Elias. You finally flipped the switch. Relief hit Elias like warmth. May, he breathed. Marlene stared, stunned. Who are they? May's gaze swept over the auditors, the custodian, the frozen tank collar. Neighbors, she said simply. The kind you don't get in an HOA. The custodian turned toward the newcomers. An authorized assembly. May cut it off. Save it. We don't answer to your ledger. The lead auditor's tablet flashed violently. Escalation beyond node parameters detected. Retreat recommended. For the first time, the authority hesitated. Not because it cared. Because resistance was expensive. The custodian lowered its arm slightly, calculating. Elias stepped beside May, voice low. They'll come back, he said. May nodded. Of course. Systems don't forgive. Elias looked over Timberline Commons, cabins, firewood stacks, frightened faces, Marlene's crumbling certainty. Then he spoke loudly, so all could hear. This was never about propane. Or wood. It was about whether you belonged to yourselves, or to them. Silence settled. Mrs. Dalton whispered, What do we do now? Elias answered with calm clarity. Now we stop asking permission to survive. Above them, the mountains stood indifferent, ancient, watching. And for the first time in years, Timberline Commons felt less like a neighborhood. And more like the beginning of a frontier.